Hey guys, and welcome back to the Young Investors Podcast. We're at episode 51 and we've got an exciting episode today. We've got a guest on. Before I introduce the guest, joining me as always is Brandon. How's it going, Brandon?
Yeah, plain simple old Brandon. Here I am. I'm recovered from episode 50 last week up in Sydney. That was so much fun, man. We've got to do that more often.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that was the greatest. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm also very excited for today because, as you're saying, we do have a pretty cool guest coming on today who I'm excited to have a chat about. Did you want to talk more about our guest?
Yeah, so we have Matt Loberstein. How's it going, Matt?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on, and I'm glad to be a pretty cool guest.
Well, I find what you do interesting because I have never, besides the YouTube stuff, I've never done what you do before, which I'm sure we'll get to. So I'm excited to kind of pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be really interesting because I don't know if many people know, but I actually tried to launch a product on Amazon before. Yeah, you did. Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves about what Matt does, but I did try and launch a product. It didn't go very well, so I'm very interested to talk about it and talk about why I failed to do it, and talk about your successes on Amazon and all of the other stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, should I just start with like some backstory on that, or?
Yeah. I'd be interested to know kind of just how you got interested in online business. Was Amazon the first thing you did? Like, how did it all start for you?
Yeah, so I got into Amazon in this model like pretty gradually in steps over time from other things. So I started out actually like hustling on Craigslist and selling stuff on eBay, mainly used items. So a lot of what I was doing was like iPhones actually. So I would, when people, this was back when like they were subsidized, you know, I mean, I guess I don't know if it was the same in Australia, but over here it was always like, you know, the $800 phone, you would actually just pay like the $200, and then it was because like the carrier was trying to incentivize you to get the plan, right? So then people so then a year or two later people would get a new phone and they'd think like, well, I paid $200 for this phone, it must be worth, you know, $100, but in reality it was worth more than they ever paid for it. So there was always kind of this like arbitrage with buying used phones. It's still there to some extent, but it's different. I mean, I haven't done this in years, but that was how I got started in e-commerce, really. And that led to it just being a disaster. I mean, it was just such a mess to try to, you know, not scalable. It's not a real business. It was a good side hustle. I was doing that, you know, through college, a lot of it. I started at Amazon, I was still in college too, but this was like earlier in college.
Right.
So, I mean, that was the first thing that got me out of a job. You know, before that, the only jobs I really had were stuff when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, just, you know, crappy random jobs, like never a real proper job, because by then I had sort of figured out some online stuff. So yeah, the sort of like hustling reselling model led me to eventually want something that could be a little, you know, scalable, not hands off in like the passive income sense, but like hands off in the sense that I'm not directly tied to the time that I'm putting in. Something where I could put time in up front and then, you know, sell the same thing over and over. And I didn't get to Amazon and private label and FBA that quick either. There was kind of like in between steps where I started importing just like bulk crap from China, basically, stuff related to phones, because I was already in like that phone industry. So I started selling like screen protectors and lightning cables and stuff like that on eBay, and I sort of tested it on Amazon as I was learning the ropes of, you know, how does this work? Because it can be really overwhelming with Amazon. You know, you're shipping products into Amazon's warehouses. You're like, how do I do the barcodes? And, you know, what kind of box does it have to be? There's like a lot of just particular things that you need to know. So like in retrospect, that was super valuable to me. And I didn't even realize this at the time, but like the fact that I just kind of like threw something in there and I wasn't like even officially starting an Amazon business. I just like kind of threw some stuff in there to learn the ropes, but then that led me to already kind of have an idea of how things worked when I more so like really started with the private label model. And, you know, for people that don't understand what that is, what I'm doing is really starting product brands from scratch in a sense, and using Amazon as a leveraged like launching platform. So, I'm not talking about wholesaling existing products or running around buying used products. It's about finding manufacturers that make a product similar to what your idea is, and there's all these ways you can vet the market. We could get into that if wanted, but you deal with the manufacturers, you put your own label on it, you make it under your own brand, and you get it into Amazon, and then you're basically a marketing company from then on, because your product is relatively hands off. It becomes relatively hands off, and your job is to create sales.
Right. So when you were getting started, were you just feeling things out for yourself? Was there anyone in particular that maybe sort of inspired you, or anyone you saw doing Amazon and that's what led you in that direction? Or how did that sort of begin for you? Did you just figure it out for yourself?
A little bit of both. So there was the landscape right now is unbelievable. I mean, the fact that there's podcasts, YouTube channels, even, paid stuff for people, like that didn't exist. That environment really wasn't there when I was starting. So it was kind of this Wild West scenario. I was very lucky that some of my eBay friends were kind of looking into this transition as well. And I think that was where I started to sort of hear, bits and pieces of what was going on. And I also just intuitively knew, like, it just made sense. Amazon was emerging. We're talking 5 years ago, and Amazon was just so emerging, and it just seemed obvious that, oh yeah, I mean, if you could just have some reviews and be on the first page, like, I mean, how could you not be crushing? So I kind of, in the back of the mind, knew that for a while. And, over that next, say, year and a half, I like phased completely out of eBay and fully into the Amazon branded model. But yeah, I mean, as far as that, like I didn't take a course. The first podcast about Amazon private labels specifically, it came out after I had already launched. So yeah, I mean, it was this Wild West, and I think that I'm definitely have a lot of gratitude for the fact that I was like surrounded by just a couple of friends that were sort of trying to navigate the same thing as me. And that really helped a lot, to just be able to bounce off of each other and and just get answers to stuff that wasn't really out there.
Right. So when you started out, by trying to find just products, say, manufactured in China that you could take across, sell on Amazon, and make money through that method. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that's basically the idea.
And now you've kind of changed into more of less about just finding products to sell. Let's start a brand around it and then market that brand. Is that kind of correct?
To be honest, I had a bit of that idea from the beginning, for sure. I mean, my first real launch became my first brand. I mean, I definitely had thought from the beginning, if this product goes well, I can do more items that are related and similar and other variations of the same thing. So I guess I just kind of had that foresight into what was happening. So I don't know where I had that idea, but I think I've just always kind of liked brands and branding and the creative side of things. So it just kind of seemed intuitive to me that, like, oh, if I'm going to like create my own product, like the brand thing, and this has been interesting, as I've got into YouTube and all this other stuff, is I find that the brand thing does not, a lot of people, I'll talk about it for hours and then they'll still be like, but what's a brand? And to me, it was just kind of this like intuitive, like it is hard to put words to it, right? And it's just this combination of things, but I guess that part came a little bit naturally to me.
Right, okay. And just for people who maybe have never heard of Amazon FBA or don't know how Amazon is different to selling things on eBay or just listing things naturally, do you want to just explain sort of maybe in the most simplistic way how Amazon FBA actually works?
Yeah, for sure. So the reason that it's such an enticing model is because this FBA thing is fulfillment by Amazon. And what that basically means is you don't have to worry about warehousing. You don't have to worry about shipping to the customers. Your job is to get your product to Amazon's warehouses. And then any of that complicated stuff that would be the main complications of running a physical product business are kind of taken care of by Amazon. And, it comes at a cost for sure, but once your products are in there and they're FBA, fulfilled by Amazon, then they're eligible for Prime shipping, which, 99% of the freaking world has Prime and loves the free, like the super fast shipping. So, by being Prime, by being FBA, you get pushed up in the search results. You get favored in so many ways. So that's why the model is so good. And on top of that, like, say why Amazon, even with FBA or not, like why Amazon is interesting, say, compared to your own website, is there's so much traffic already there. So rather than trying to create this demand, if you can just position your product as a great offer amongst search results that people are typing in every single day looking to buy stuff, that's the opportunity. It's a hard thing to, run a Facebook ad about your Shopify store and convince somebody that was like browsing random pictures to go to your store. They didn't even know they wanted this product and now buy it. Like, that's very different than somebody that's typing in planters for succulents on Amazon. They're like looking to buy that product. And then if you private label that product and you make a cooler design, you make it come in an awesome box, you maybe, you include something in it that, helps make it a better offer in some way, then why wouldn't people buy yours?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's super interesting. I can see that there's kind of a lot that goes into it. And I imagine that this is a lot of stuff that you've just slowly learnt over time. I was wondering, for someone like first getting started, or maybe we'll talk about when you first started out, what was, say, one of the first products that you started selling on Amazon, and kind of how did you go about that? And at what point did you kind of figure out, did it click to you that, oh yeah, Amazon, this is really got serious potential?
Yeah, I mean, so because of like the whole personal brand side of things, YouTube side of things, most people that talk pretty openly about it don't really say the exact products, just because of, those reasons. And those first ones are honestly still brands that I'm running today. So
okay.
I can't really get into those specific examples too much, but I mean, the first ones that like learned that taught me the ropes, I mentioned I had this phone accessory stuff, and that, while that didn't really like get fleshed out into a brand, that was where I learned the ropes and saw the potential. So I sold, by the way, these are horrible products. Like, anyone listening should not try to sell these products. They're like the worst of the worst products, and that's why they didn't work. So, don't be like, he said to sell this. But, I sold tempered glass screen protectors for phones. I sold selfie sticks on Amazon. So selfie sticks were actually, and this was when they were like the hot thing. This was probably 4.5 something years ago. And this was where I really saw the potential, because it took off. I mean, I had some days all of a sudden where I was clearing, I think I hit $1,000 a day on that product for the first time. I think it was that one.
Wow. Right. Okay.
That's in revenue, of course. But I mean, I think my profit was probably $300 or something, which is
pretty good.
Yeah. That was like the, that was like, oh, okay, this works. And that was still me being scrappy, trying to figure it out. I didn't brand that product. I came up with a name, and it came in a super generic box. I just put my barcode on it. That was basically it. And then just like, launched it on Amazon, did all that, and started taking off, and became a nightmare for a host of other reasons, and stopped it pretty quickly. But that was really what that proved it to me.
All right. So when you launched that product, when you say that you launched it on Amazon, do you just stick it up there and that's it? Then it's all at the mercy of Amazon? Or is there any kind of strategy that you took back then, at least? And then maybe we'll talk about how that strategy might have sort of changed over time.
Yeah, no, that's the right way to phrase that question, because the strategies have changed a lot over time. So what I did back then is not allowed now. And I was always about playing by the book. These things have changed, but there were people that were manipulating things hard back then and still now. But what I did was like, what are the things that work, but they're allowed? And back then you were literally allowed to give away products in exchange for reviews. So that is a huge
wow.
That is a huge no now. Like, don't do that. That like when that was allowed, everyone knew like this is not gonna last. Like this is so
sketchy.
Some people would come in really well funded and give away thousands, because and they would end up with 1,000.
So reviews are that important.
Well, here's the thing. So reviews are important, but there's still truth in this part today. It's that the sales are what drives ranking. So if you give away,
you can count it.
Right. So they count in the system as sales, and they were leading to ranking. So let's think of an example. Like I guess like a high volume product would be. I mean, let's say like fish oil. Fish oil is like a 6 years ago Amazon product. Huge market. Worst product to get into now. But back then, if you were launching a fish oil, some companies would come in with tens of thousands of dollars. They would give away thousands of units, and they would give it away through keywords as well. Like you can sort of stuff the URL that people are buying through with a keyword. It was called like a super URL back then. There's still variations of this today, but it would then, so this URL would say keyword fish oil in it, and then you would send that out to your 1,000 people that are going to get it for free, which is a huge loss, obviously, up front. But then it's telling Amazon, hey, this is super relevant to fish oil because these 1,000 people just bought it in one day. So Amazon's going to move this up to the top pretty much. And then all of those giveaway sales lead to reviews. So that's kind of how it worked back then. And I never pushed it that far because I knew like this is still a bit shady, but I would give away 20 of something to like get it started, trying to just get those initial few reviews, because that's the hardest thing is going from 0 reviews to 5 reviews. If you already have hundreds, the incremental increases will make marginal differences, but it's not really night and day compared to say like 0 compared to 25, right? So that's how it was back then. Like that was the launch strategy in my first year or two. It was do a bit of giveaways, and then a huge strategy which still applies today is Amazon PPC. So PPC is like the ad platform within Amazon. So sponsored products showing up, pay per click. That's PPC. So if you're you can bid on the keyword fish oil. That would probably be a super expensive one. You pay X dollars in that case per somebody clicking because yours shows up at the top as sponsored. That's a huge way to drive a lot of sales still today. That's still part of my launch strategy today. But since the giveaways have gone away, now you really have to layer on things that were good back then but are more necessary now. Is like, how can you make this whole well-rounded marketing approach, advertising off of Amazon, driving people to Amazon, building your own lists, building your own audiences. These things are harder, but obviously that's where kind of like the equity value is long-term to your brand. And even without those things, there's still a lot that can be done with a great offer, which is something that does not get talked about enough. It's just like the product, the positioning, the whole offer, and then PPC, getting it out there, and kind of a slow and steady growth. That's more of my approach than this big extravaganza launch with like, layering like 10,000 tactics at once. And plus for me, if I'm launching something on an existing brand, that's part of why having related products is the way to go. Is I can leverage my existing products to my new products, and I can leverage past customers.
That's super smart. It sounds like this is definitely something that you've just evolved your strategy over time to suit, how you want to run it. Do you reckon with all of this stuff being so popular now and basically everyone on the internet talking about it, if you were a complete beginner, do you still reckon there's space to come into that sort of field and start selling on Amazon? Or do you reckon that there's just people starting now have kind of missed the boat? Do you reckon there's still room in the market?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely not delusionally optimistic about it, saying that everyone will be successful and that it's super easy. It's not. It has gotten harder. It has matured So you do have to go about it differently now, for sure. But for people that are really thinking methodically and planning and focusing in, I'm definitely still seeing a good amount of opportunity, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so and would there be if someone was just starting out, what would be the most simple, basic, fundamental strategy that you would kind of say, look, if you wanted to make it on Amazon FBA, this is probably the way you would have to start out? Because I imagine for someone that just wants to start out, jumping to everything that you're doing right now would be a bit of a leap. What would be the way in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So much of it still comes down to product research, which has always been true. But back then, you really could slap up a lot of different products and succeed. I mean, it was just like, how big of an opportunity do you want to go for? And then how much do you have to invest in giveaways, right? That was basically the determinant for which product you want to go to. Now it's much more refined. So I think it's kind of like step one, back to basics rather than saying all these crazy tactics. I think the most important thing is still, how do you evaluate products in this 2019, 2020 Amazon landscape? Like, how do we know our numbers? How do we understand the competition? How do we make a really unique offer? How do we think about the long-term in branding? Is the profit margin actually there? Because a lot of your competitors don't understand profit margin and will drive it into the ground. So how can I be premium? How can I get it up to a higher price point? I think that is still the most important thing, because what I still think and believe and see personally in my business and in a lot of people that I talk with, when you have those things aligned, a lot of the other stuff will fall into place on itself, and those are things that you just add on along the journey, right? Like if you're first, if you get out the gate sucking, then you try all these other things. That is just not a good place to be. Like, you need to kind of try, you still need to go, you kind of need to approach it as if you're not going to do anything else, if that makes any sense. Like, you have to kind of go into it like, where is there just so much opportunity that I could pretty much, and I'm not advising do nothing else, but where's an opportunity that looks right, such that I really think I can attack this without doing a lot of this crazy stuff. And then the more you kind of layer those things on, the better. I mean, it's still totally possible to launch with a good product, do Amazon PPC, slow and steady, start building up. And I definitely totally see those taking off. And it's not the products that are obvious. It's the products that are a little more obscure, not the first thing that people find, right? That's where the opportunities are.
Yeah, I think such a big part of it just is going to come down to, as it sort of matures over time and the sort of dodgy stuff gets out of the way. I mean, I remember when I was launching my product about 18 months ago, you couldn't do the giveaways, but you could still do like 99% discounted products. and that was like really dodgy. But it was basically the same thing as doing giveaways, but it was kind of like a sidestep to that rule. But I guess ultimately, I think this is probably the main reason why mine didn't work, was because there was no focus on just the value of the product to the customer as well as a core. And that's ultimately what matters, I think. And this was when I was very early into, I think this was probably the first business I tried to start. And I was at that stage where I was kind of just looking for a shortcut, looking for a tactic, when ultimately after that experience, I kind of learned that ultimately business just comes down to solving a problem and providing as much value as possible. And that was kind of the lesson that I had to go through. But it's interesting to see Amazon sort of mature through that stage, because I think, like as you say about the giveaways and all of that, it was kind of this tactical game, whereas now maybe it's maturing more into providing as much value as possible to the customer.
100%. So, I think the valuable skills going forward are things like branding, of course, but copywriting and community building, and really things that would be valuable whether it's Amazon or not, because you're really just building a product brand. And one thing I do want to clarify is the whole giveaway change thing is it sounds like when you launched, that was sort of the period where you could do super deep discounts, but you couldn't do it in exchange for a review. So it was like, you know, you could still sort of game the algorithm, and you still can do that to some extent today. Like, you can run promotions, you can use coupons and discounts. So I don't want people to think that you can't do any of that, but you can't tie it to review, and you can't, you know, give away 1,000 in a day to like game the algorithm in the way that people did before. But, you know, you can get creative to some extent.
Right.
Super interesting. Yeah. It sounds like back in the day, you could literally just, these product giveaways, it sounded like you're just paying for SEO, basically, in a roundabout kind of way.
Yeah. You would just think about, you know, how willing to go into the red are you? And that kind of, that, and depend, and in proportion with that is how big of an opportunity do you want? So the bigger the opportunity, the more into the red you're going to go to rank for these really competitive products. But yeah, I mean, it kind of was like an SEO. It was just a line item on the launch list. It was like, you know, $3,000 for product, $2,000 for giveaway. And you're, and like, okay, so it's like, okay, I can, you know, let's say for $8,000, I can generate $12,000 a month in revenue on this product. Like, it was just very transactional, and it made it, and that's why the products suffered. I mean, back then you had, ultimately all these platforms, I mean, they're getting better for the consumer, right? So back then you had a lot of products that weren't great, yet they had 5,000 5-star reviews and were selling 300 units a day, and then you'd get it and you'd like, this is a piece of crap. So so none of these people are always like asking me, you know, like, aren't you like afraid of Amazon, or like, what do you think about this change or this change or this change? And I'm like, you know, all of these things are relatively predictable. Like, it's not like, if you're trying to be a good business, like, as simple as that sounds, like, it kind of works out, you know, like the good stuff does rise to the top. And that's why I think like product focus, you know, marketing focus in a not manipulative way, but in a way that shows customers this is the right choice. And hopefully it actually is. Hopefully you've put some thought into crafting your product and your offer to be something that, you know, fits that need a little bit better than their alternatives. And that is the value of your offer. Your offer like has to be a better value in any number of ways.
Yeah, and it sounds like for you, probably the Wild West, old school Amazon probably is less of what you sound like you're about on Amazon, and the new school Amazon sounds like what you're more about, more like making high quality products and launching with brands behind them and that sort of stuff. I was wondering as well, with your journey on Amazon, see, I've never done Amazon, so I'm a bit of a noob here, but is it something that eventually ends up being fairly passive for you, or does it still kind of dominate your time? And if it does end up passive, at what stage of the process do you kind of sit back and realize, oh, actually this kind of just takes care of itself?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, I put very little time into it at this point. You know, I have business ADD. I'm always thinking about the next ideas and all that. Like, that is what's fun for me. So it is not my primary focus. And we'll probably get into YouTube and stuff later, but for a while, like when I started on YouTube, I was saying, you know, I'm trying to like scale. And then I realized, you know, this is not even what I want. Like, isn't it actually more beautiful that I got it to a point where I can just kind of enjoy the benefits of it?
Yeah.
You know, so for a while I was like, oh, I'm in this like weird place where, because everyone thinks I'm like just trying to grow it as giant as humanly possible. And then I'm like, oh, well, it's not even what I want necessarily. So at this point, I mean, you can I can put very little into it. I mean, it's a matter of, it's mostly automated. I mean, the only thing I don't really have automated or have somebody doing is reorders of inventory, which is not a lot of work. I mean, it's basically sending a couple of emails. So, yeah, I mean, and then look, I'm not saying most people should do it that way, but that is definitely sort of the way that I've got mine to for the most part. It's pretty hands off. And I think to the question about like how long that takes, each product kind of has its own life cycle of how long it takes. So it didn't become really passive for me for a while, because I was constantly restarting that process, right? Like part of the whole reason that I've done well is because I didn't just launch one product and then I'm like, oh my God, this is great. And then I just like, never did anything else. That won't work. But because I did it like again and again and again and again and again, then it got to a point where I have this portfolio of products. And look, it's hard to give an answer to it, honestly, because each product kind of has a different timeline too. Like a product might take off like crazy in a month and another product might never take off. So it kind of varies in terms of how long you can go passive on it. But, I definitely wouldn't bank on it for at least like, I would count on a good 3 to 6 months to like get a product to a place where you're pretty happy. And then to even really know what's going on, and then reorders. And the biggest difficulty in scaling up is like the cash flow, and that's why it takes up a lot of time. So, you can't, like, even if your product is absolutely crushing it, you can't really go passive right away unless you just have a huge reserve of cash and you can order a ton of inventory. Because the reality of it is, you spend $5,000 on inventory, you do $12,000 in sales, you get back $8,000, but that's after you placed your second order. So you're kind of in this like constant juggling of money and inventory for a while. And until that kind of smooths itself out, it can just be like maybe not a lot of work, but definitely a much bigger mental burden at those stages.
Right. Okay. And since you've had sort of quite a lot of success on Amazon, you did go on and now you help people, you teach people how to do what you've done and how to build brands. Did you want to sort of tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing there?
Yeah, I mean, so that really came out of YouTube. I started YouTube a little over 2 years ago at this point, and honestly, I know this probably sounds like one of those like canned answers, but I genuinely did not think of myself as like, hey, YouTube, I have all the answers and you're going to want to subscribe because I'm a genius and you need to learn from me. It really was just like, this is like what I'm doing and this is what I've done. And, and people, I'm lucky that it did attract an audience and people were very intrigued by it and wanted a lot more. So, I always hated courses and all of that. Eventually, just because of people asking for it and wanting it, I understood the value to them, and I offered that eventually to work with people on a deeper level. And I still do YouTube, I have a Facebook group, all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, it just transformed into a way to help people and also turn it into a different business for myself, honestly. And it's definitely more lifestyle and long-term focused. I started YouTube because of Gary Vee and thinking like, this is going to be this is going to be valuable to me in 5-10 years. I don't know how, but I'm just going to put in the work. I had an editor hired that I was paying video one. So, I mean, I was just like,
wow.
I was obviously not looking at it from an ROI standpoint. But yeah, I mean, it did lead to things much quicker than I thought, which is cool. But no, YouTube is definitely like its whole own beast.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should talk about that. So when did you say you started your YouTube channel?
It was July 2017. So like 2 years, 3 months ish.
Right. Okay. And so what was kind of so you're saying that you just wanted to kind of put out there what you started doing, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. How is your content what content do you focus on? Do you go into just Amazon specifics, or do you talk generally about just business in general? What sort of content do you make at the moment?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, it's definitely a bit different than where I started. I definitely started more Amazon focused because that was where it started to take off. But I like to talk about other things. This is something I learned from, I didn't anticipate. I was so in the Amazon world, but like after you talk about it nonstop for 2 years, at least the way my brain works, like I want to talk about some other things. So, I still mix in Amazon videos for sure now. but there's definitely a lot of great Amazon content already on the channel that, people can dig into. But now it's like, I'm really enamored by like I'm not into maximizing growth for the sake of growth, and I think that's been a lot of where my mindset and my thoughts have been lately. There's so much like hustle and all of that, grow, and I'm much more like wait, like, well, this isn't even what I wanted. Like I'm talking and thinking about how do I structure my life in a way where I have time and freedom, and maybe not the most ROI money focused thing, but like, to me, the way that actually creates the life that I want. So lifestyle design, sort of those sorts of things are what really intrigue me more than just business. I've always sort of thought, this business thing, this entrepreneur thing, it really is just a means to an end. Like, when people say that they love the game, I'm skeptical. I think that most people, look, and I've been there. It's like a place of fear, a place of scarcity. And that's what drives us to, want freedom and want to create the lifestyle that we want and have the time we want to explore the things that interest us. And look, these online businesses are kind of a means to an end. They're not like the thing itself. So that's something I think a lot about. And I'm trying to shift my content into a more thoughtful place, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. That's something that I've thought about a lot this year in particular, just balancing between making content that will grow the channel as quickly as possible, even though that content might be something that I don't want to talk about or even something that I don't quite get behind, versus just making content that I really like to talk about and providing as much in-depth value as possible. Because, generally the videos that provide a lot of value that are like 20, 25 minutes long and actually get into the details of what people need to know about a particular topic, they're generally not going to be the ones that are going to blow up. The ones that are going to blow up are the ones that get people excited about sort of starting something new or just...
Totally.
Tell them how they can get rich quickly.
Yeah. Go on.
Alex Becker talks a lot about this, about how like there's kind of like an inverse correlation between like how big somebody's YouTube is and like how legit they actually are. And like, there's these like crazy CEOs that'll like throw a video on YouTube and they have like 45 subscribers or something. And, that's cool. But like the tactical, like, quote, valuable content definitely does worse. But I also think that, and this could be just like even too weird of a thought, but I think there's multiple types of value, like I don't think it's all just in like a long form tactical thing. Like if you create like almost from like an artistic point of view, like something that makes people think and makes them change in some other fundamental way, like that is a form of value as well. I mean, even channels that make entertainment and make funny stuff, that's value in a different way too, and so I think there's different types of value and there's a lot of stuff that is just, what works. And for sure in that space, it's not always the best stuff that rises to the top. Like no doubt about that.
Yeah. I'm looking at your channel. Are you a bit of a car guy as well?
Yeah, that's definitely that's my like main irrational obsession. Yeah, you could say.
I think that's me and Hamish. We were in Sydney together the other week, and we were just having a laugh because we know like nothing about cars, but we still love cars. Yeah. In fact, we were talking. We said we didn't even like cars. We just like luxury cars. I think we're just like addicted to those cars that you just like make for great posters. What's your favorite car? Bit of a sidetrack. What's your favorite car?
It depends on what. I mean, do you want the long answer or the short? I mean, I'm like so into this at times. So I have kind of like there's a tier of completely unrealistic cars. Like multi-million-dollar cars, stuff like that. I'm those. My favorite would be the Koenigsegg Agera RS. Those are next level amazing. Below that, like in the real sphere of the world, I have developed just an unbelievable obsession with Porsche. So basically all I think about at this point is Porsche.
Oh, Hamish.
Yeah.
And McLaren as well a bit, but I mean, I'm just like a Porsche guy, like through and through right now. So, I mean, even what I have right now is definitely a dream car, and you know, I just want more of them, basically. So,
what are you running at the moment?
I have a Porsche GT4.
Oh wow, nice.
GT4. I think we saw one of those in
Yeah,
Sydney.
we
the other
did.
week,
Yeah,
didn't
I
we?
don't know what it is about Porsches. I'm obsessed with them as well. But I'm really not a car guy at all. Like, if you ask me anything about a car, I'll have no idea. But if you ask me to identify a Porsche, I'll be able to tell you which one it is.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, that's the real car guy, though. I mean, I'm probably gonna offend some people, but the people that just like Lambos are not car guys. They're just they want the feeling, right? Like the car, the Porsches are great driving cars. I mean, I take this thing to the racetrack. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing in the canyons. It's not just about like the craziness. It's like, this is a driving machine. Like, my car is not practical, and that's what I love about it. You know, it's not a good car. Like, it's not. I mean, it's great, but it's you know.
For car type functionality,
right?
Everyday car type functionality.
It's hard to get in and out of. It has these ridiculous harnesses all over it. It hits the ground everywhere I go. You know, the sound system is worse than the car that I had previously, which was an older Porsche Cayman, which I sold it for $20,000. It was a 2008. And that had a better sound system than this one. I mean, it's just like, it's not a luxury thing. It's like a visceral thing. But yeah, I mean, that if you appreciate Porsche, like then you have it in you.
There you go.
There you go, Hamish. That's you. Hamish basically, he just said to me the other day when we were in Sydney together, he was saying basically the same stuff. He was saying, oh, I don't know about Lambos. Like, Lambos, they're just arrogant pricks, but Porsches, that's where it's at. That's where it's at.
Maybe I'd get one at some point, but like right now,
No,
they're
that's
doing
funny.
nothing for me. Like, I'm just so over the Lambos. Like, I'll see them and I'll just be like, whatever. But then I could see like some rare Porsche that's not even that expensive and just like absolutely lose my shit.
Yeah, like, it's just too much for me. Like, I couldn't do the attention that draws. Whereas like a Porsche, people like kind of turn their head and like, oh, that's nice. Whereas with like a Lambo, people are like following you and like, I mean, at least I know how I look at people who have a Lambo. Like, I'm just like walking around their car doing circles.
It's strange. I mean, because I think everyone, like, we feel like we want that until you feel it, and it's like not a good feeling like everyone's looking at you on the road. Like, even in the GT4, it happens a little bit, but it's not like, I don't feel like I'm so cool because people are looking at me. I'm like, oh, this is like a little awkward, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, what must these people think of me driving this expensive car? Because I think typically, and I think this is a bit of a problem. I think that society generally hates rich people, which I think is a massive problem. But I think it makes sense because most of the rich people that you see in society tend to be, or the ones that pop up a lot in the media or on the news or whatever, tend to be a little bit dickheadish. But I actually, like, a lot of people, like, I definitely respect most rich people, because most rich people are definitely not dickheads. They're just nice people, and they've genuinely made their money through legitimate means, and they've worked very hard for it. But I can understand, like, if you're that guy that's just driving that super loud Lambo, just like everybody looking at you, I just sit there just thinking like, oh man, what are these people
I think that's a
me?
great thought that you just touched on, like the negativity towards rich people. And I think that's a mindset that keeps people not rich also, and it just kind of spreads hate and negativity. Like, it's not that's bad on so many levels, and I think that's really like a good observation, you know. And I see it too, for sure.
What else should we talk about? You've got a podcast at the moment, is that right? Or one that you're just starting up?
Both, actually. So I have.
Oh, okay. Tell us more about that, man. You sound like you're someone that gets shiny object syndrome a little bit.
I definitely do.
You're always chasing that next thing.
For sure, yeah. And you know, and I think it's because I'm going through like a bit of a shift to like a new era of what it means for me in business and all of this stuff. But yeah, so and also trying to do less, honestly. Like I'm planting seeds for things that I can eventually be the main things. You know, maybe 5 years from now, I do one podcast a week and like I'm writing a book. I don't know. Like I don't know, but maybe that's where I'm in 5 or 10 years. I think that'd be really cool. But anyways, yeah. So I'm starting a interview style podcast. You know, kind of like Tim Ferriss show, Joe Rogan sort of thing. Like, you know, sit down with a guest.
I love those podcasts.
Deep dives. Like, I don't want it to be rushed. I want it to be sit down and let's, you know, it's not like, how do we, like I like the vibe that you guys have here. Like, it's not one of those, let's knock out these 10 questions in 10 minutes and like on to the next sort of thing.
Yeah.
I like when you can kind of be a little bit loose and get into the stuff and into the interesting things. And so, interviews, definitely not just e-commerce. You know, I really want it to be, I think the common thread between everything will be in some way life optimization. So that's the way I think of my YouTube channel as well, is like, I don't think of it as Amazon. I don't think of it as e-commerce, but really the long-term play is full life optimization. And so these guests could be anything from, some may be e-commerce, some may be other business owners, some may be health and biohacking related, which is another obsession of mine. Some of it could just be anybody that I think is interesting and that's onto something. And if it piques my interest, I figure there's probably something there to it that would pique other people's interests. So yeah, that's what's coming. I think what you touched on is I do have a podcast already, which is just a completely different fun one that I have with a friend of mine, Sam Feldman. We have a podcast called Thoughts from Space Rock, which is just for fun. It's me and him just
cool.
Just it no guests. It's just us talking and like getting into weird, interesting things.
Yeah. No.
Oh, that's cool. I like having an outlet like that, somewhere that you're just totally unrestricted in whatever the hell you want to talk about. And that's like, they're the best ones because you can just sit down with a friend and just explore whatever piques your interest or whatever you've learned about in that week, or just something that's popped into your brain. Just like, hey, what do you think about this?
Totally. I mean, the podcast, I love podcasts. I mean, that's why I think I would hope that that mine takes off to a point where it can be a main focus of what I'm doing, because I love consuming podcasts and I just think that you can learn so much from it. And I think it's so helpful for the people doing it as well, like to have these real conversations, because especially, you know, in our current world, like we just never really sit down and have any level of focus, whether we're having a conversation or not. So I think it's a great way to distill your thoughts and all of that, and you know, to just be a human for an hour, right?
Yeah, I really like Joe Rogan's podcast, just of how sort of conversational it is, and he'll just have someone on that's interesting.
He's a master.
He is a master, and he'll have someone on interesting, and obviously they'll have things they want to talk about, what they're doing, their book or whatever they're doing at the moment. But then the conversation can just go anywhere, which is what I really like. Yeah. He'll be talking to someone about completely different topics that sort of have no relationship to the person he's talking to, and I think that is really fascinating, that it is really just a conversation and it's not rigid. I find sort of the conversational podcasts the most interesting and the most sort of the easiest to listen to, I think.
Definitely.
Totally. That's a good observation about Joe Rogan, because I think that is what makes it so interesting, is he'll have like a longevity doctor on, and he's like asking him about aliens or something. And it's just like it has this, it's oddly intriguing to hear people out of their element. I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I've never thought about that before, actually. That's totally right. It is interesting, because a lot of the times we just hear, you know, people of note talking about what they're experts in. It is kind of cool to hear what their thoughts are about like shit that no one would ever bring up with them ever. Like, I don't know, even stuff like, you know, what cereal do you eat in the mornings? It's just like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think Tim Ferriss does that well too, with like digging into the morning routines, which is something I've obsessed over. And, you know, ask like literally like, what do you eat for breakfast? Like, no, wait, what time? Like, do you use a spoon or a fork? It's just like very, very specific. But like those details really like make it clear, because I think it's easy to say like, oh yeah, you know, I get up around 8 and then I just like do some things. But he's like, no, like walk me through this, you know, like do you make the coffee, or the coffee is like already ready, or like, you know.
It's I think One of the most interesting podcasts that I'd like to listen to is just someone like Joe Rogan sitting down with Elon Musk and just getting Elon Musk to explain exactly how his week unfolds, because he's always talking about SpaceX and the Boring Company and Tesla and this and that, this new thing that he's doing. I'd be super interested just to hear, like, how is this time split up? Like, where do you go? Like, how does it all work together? Because you seem impossibly busy.
Yeah, like just to get into that stuff is valuable. And I think it's hard for people to, like, I find myself doing it too, is I think people have their sort of like set answers and stuff. And like to get somebody like Elon Musk to not, to get into that in a way that maybe he's never said publicly or something is definitely it's a skill.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing Joe Rogan does really well is, obviously he's a super smart guy, but he kind of comes at it from the approach of just an average person curious and just asking questions, which is, I think, is the most fascinating part of it. It's not this high level podcast that no one can access. He's asking really basic and sort of common questions that the viewers would be thinking in their head when they're listening to it.
Yeah, he's for sure the master of that. The obvious question, not obvious, but like I love watching it, but as I get ready to like start my podcast, which I think will be maybe somewhere in the middle of like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan. Like Joe Rogan's is really loose, but you know, I watch them and I'm just like, how do he's so good at keeping the conversation going. Like even across these completely unrelated topics, it's really fascinating. And it might seem like he's just sitting down, just like super chilling, but he definitely has his craft down.
He does.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you start podcasting, you realize that, wow, that's actually really hard to do. Like, eventually, I'm sure I'd just hit a block where I'd just be like, okay, what do I ask you about now? But no, I like podcasting. Oh, it'd be interesting to see how it all goes.
Do you get that? Like, do you have those silences ever? What do you do?
Oh, we've always got a show, like a document of show notes. So we've got our general structure. We don't like obviously script it, but we know the order in which we're going to talk about stuff, and we know what we're going to talk about. So if we just run out of things to say, we just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So and we've got typically in our podcast, we just talk about like stock market news up first, and then we just have a kind of mid discussion, like a middle section discussion topic, and then finish with Q&A. So we've always got Q&A questions that, you know, if we fall short a bit on the middle section, we just add more Q&A or something like that. And it always kind of, in fact, we're actually remarkably good at getting it to almost an hour every single time. Yeah, it's like scary.
I don't know how we do it.
Yeah, maybe we just get fatigued after an hour, so we're just like, let's just wrap this up.
This is enough.
And this is probably going to be one that will be almost the same, I would imagine. But anyway, should we move on? One more thing that I did want to have a chat to you about as well, Matt, is kind of, you've talked about how I sense a little bit of shiny object syndrome, as I was saying before. How you're doing YouTube now, you're doing podcasting, you've come through and have, I would say, you probably wouldn't agree with me, but I'd say for most people, you've basically mastered Amazon. You certainly know what you're doing and have learnt how to make money consistently on Amazon. What do you reckon? What's the next thing for you? Like, where's your head at the moment? What's piquing your interest at the moment, and what do you want to focus more on? Where do you kind of see yourself pushing in the next few years?
Definitely more towards things that I'm passionate about. I would even say that's a slight regret even with Amazon, is I should have started passion projects all along the way, because I hit burnout with so many things that I'm doing because of that. So now I'm kind of in this like reevaluation stage where, I could see how from the outside it seems like I'm starting a lot, but I feel like I'm kind of like honing down in some ways too, almost simultaneously. Like I'm trying to just find these more creative outlets where I'm only doing a few things, and a lot of the things that I do work together. Like for example, this new podcast, it's going to live on my YouTube channel. So
right,
like who knows? Maybe eventually that's what my YouTube is eventually. I don't know, but it's kind of like an evolution of it, rather than like just like a new thing and a new thing and a new thing. So, I'm trying to find like peacefulness and flow in my lifestyle. That's like probably my core thing. It's like I don't want to work. I don't want to. I hate the word grind. Like I think that it's the wrong way to look at it. I want to build my life the way that I want it. So that is my main focus, is not to make the most money in the world, not to build the biggest Amazon business in the world, not to have the biggest podcast in the world, but to do what feels right to me in the moment, and to be working on creative things, I think is something I'm realizing is more and more important. I've tried to make some more creative videos over the past few months, and I don't know, like writing some posts and stuff more like that. The podcast will be creative. So yeah, I mean, kind of, it's a little bit of a roundabout answer, but that's where I'm headed. I even to tie it into like the car obsession we were talking about, I have like some side projects in that space that I'm really excited about, because they're just fun.
Okay.
And they don't feel like work the way that other things that I've been working on now feel like work. So, trying to find more things like that don't feel like work, like this conversation podcast, that doesn't feel like work.
No, it feels cool,
messing around with some of this like car related potential businesses doesn't really feel like work. It feels like fun. I'm like doing one with a friend of mine. It's cool. So stuff like that. Stuff that one thing. So I can't take credit for this phrase, but it was Ryan Daniel Moran. He's like he runs capitalism.com and a great podcast, Freedom Fastlane. He, at his conference like earlier this year, I can't phrase it as eloquently, but he said something about, finding the things that you would be doing anyways and turning those into like your life and your business. So like, what are the things you'd be doing anyways? Like, even if they didn't lead to this, even if they didn't lead to that, like, what are the things you'd be doing anyways? And I'm trying to do more of those what I'd be doing anyways things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then I guess sort of outside of the realm of online business and making money, maybe you've touched on this a little bit, but is there anything in particular you're focused on that is completely outside of the realm of online business that you sort of is a long-term goal for you?
That's a good question. Maybe not as much as like a tangible goal, but I definitely have like other obsessions and stuff outside of business. Like I said, I see business as a means to an end. So, for me, it's about crafting that perfect life. It's about, I'm trying to read more. I'm trying to meditate more. I'm trying to spend more time outdoors. I'm really obsessed with health and biohacking and interested in longevity and, living healthy in a long time and things like that. Like, I obsess over that stuff. So I kind of feel like that is just as much an overarching sort of goal or path as business. If anything, I kind of feel like my identity as a business person is something I'm trying to like shrink, because I really just want to be like me and do these things that are, sustain everything. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that's all we've got time for today. So thank you, Matt, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about you or consuming some of your content?
Yeah, definitely the best place I would say is YouTube. And that's just youtube.com/Matt Loberstein, which is Loberstein. Same name on Instagram. Yeah, we were talking about it's just hard name.
Classic. L-O-B. Okay, get your pen out. L-O.
Yeah, seriously. And I mean, same name on Instagram too, for more of like a personal side of things. I also have a course for Amazon that's Zero to Brand course. I just did a free training. Maybe people would want to check that out. Sure. A good way to get some info on that. So that's at zerotobrandcourse.com/free training. People can check that out. And yeah, definitely YouTube is the core place to find my content, and Instagram would be the main place to sort of connect with me.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, so as I said, thanks for joining us today, and thanks, Brandon, as always, for joining us.
That's all right. No worries. Happy to be here.
That's good. You're here every week, so I hope you're here. I hope you're happy to be here, Brandon.
All right, cool.
Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week. See you later, guys.
All right. Bye.